So I'd like to have the 4 panelists come up and take a seat. Yeah. I will do some introductions first, and then we'll start with our questions. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have questions, we'll try to leave a little time at the end for those. So let's see. First of all, I'd like to introduce Grace Garvey, sitting at the end there, who's been a member of the Plymouth Energy Commission since 2017 and is currently serving as the PEC chair. Grace led an initiative that resulted in the passage of a warrant to fund the municipal solar array in Plymouth. The array is anticipated to be constructed and commissioned in 2023. Previously, she served as president of the board of directors for the Plymouth Area Renewable Energy Commission and volunteer manager for Local Foods Plymouth. In her non-volunteer life, Grace works as a mediator and consultant to land trusts working to conserve land in New England. She lives in Plymouth with her husband, Todd. And secondly, well, I'm going to jump around. I'm going to start with Brian Eisenhauer. He served as director of the Office of Environmental Sustainability at Plymouth State University since 2010 and greatly enjoys the opportunity to work with students, faculty, and staff to improve Plymouth State University's relationship with the environment. Brian's primary areas of academic specialty are sustainability science and natural resource environmental sociology, fields that study community in its largest sense by examining the relationships between society, culture, and the environment. Third here, we have Jerry Beck. Hi, Jerry. Jerry has been concerned with the damage being done to the planet by human activity for years. He researched solutions and concluded that the single best way to combat the climate crisis was to put a fee on carbon pollution and return the proceeds to consumers. This led to his involvement with Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL, at the federal level, Carbon Cashback Coalition at the state level, and the PEMI Climate Emergency Coalition at the local level. He also worked with the Holderness Climate Task Force to pass a 2020 warrant article requesting that our state and federal elected representatives enact carbon pricing legislation. Jerry is currently working with 3 other concerned citizens to get the New Hampshire Electric Co-op to take meaningful climate action. And finally, here we have Sandra Jones, who is the founder of the Plymouth Area Renewable Energy Initiative, PARI. Driven by her concerns about the economic and environmental impacts caused by fossil fuels, PARI since 2004 has been providing community-based and professional services to help the Plymouth area community reduce and produce energy one home, one building at a time. In 2017, Sandra led the effort to partner with New Hampshire Electric Co-op and area nonprofits to develop PARI's New Hampshire Solar Shares program, a program that builds community solar arrays on donated space to provide solar credits for households in need of assistance. That's a win-win. So thank you all for coming. What we're going to do, I'm going to start with the questions, and we will just pass the mic because we only have one mic. Someday we'll be really high tech. So I'm going to start, I might as well start with Sandra since she's right here. What renewable energy technology do you think holds the most promise for our region and why?
Alrighty, thanks for having me. I think everyone knows the answer I'm going to give because I know many of you in this room, and I'm also known as the solar lady in town. Solar energy, I think, is the most scalable, the most versatile, and it's a great renewable energy application to put on existing buildings instead of using our farmland, our mountaintops. I'm a big believer in also installing renewable energy where the energy or where the electrical load is happening. So the solar is feeding that electrical load while the building is demanding it. And there's a greener component in using that renewable energy where the demand is, because you're not purchasing or getting solar from the grid, or I'm sorry, energy from the grid. You're getting it from your own roof. So when you're not taking it from the grid, you're not pulling in as much fossil fuel-based electricity generation. So I'm a big believer in solar energy, and I've got a lot more thoughts than that, but we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'll pass it on to Jerry.
Hi, and thanks for having me. I guess the single biggest thing at the personal level I think folks could do is electrify everything. Electrical car, EVs, heat pumps. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
EVs, heat pumps, and other appliances that run on electricity, they're much more efficient than fossil fuel fed everything. So as far as at the local level or at the individual level, actually, I think that's where we can get the biggest bang for the buck.
The advantage, oh, thank you very much for having me. I very much appreciate the invitation. I want to acknowledge that before I begin. And the advantage of going third is you can piggyback on what other smart people already said. But I truly would start the list with solar. I agree with everything that Sandra said in terms of being scalable, applicable. There's other efficiency gains. Anyone who knows electricity, you may notice actually anyone who pays a bill, there's something called T&D charges, transmission and distribution. We lose energy when we send it great distances. There's a lot of advantages there. I think the other thing I would mention, and as far as electrifying, I also agree we can get electricity potentially from different sources more easily than we can just fossil fuels. So we have more flexibility and potentially resiliency there. So I think that's an advantage. And I would conclude just by wanting to add to the mix that I think energy diversity is important to enhance our resilience. And so, for instance, in a place like New Hampshire, I believe there's probably a small scale role for things like biomass, for institutional heat, schools, things like that. Maybe not at a homeowner level because of various efficiencies, but at that larger scale. So that's how I'll respond, and I'll pass it off to Grace.
Can I just say ditto? I like to mirror what Brian just said, and I think that a diverse portfolio of renewables is really important at a time like this. Solar being probably primary, but can't always put all your eggs in one basket. So I think that he's spot on with a little bit of hydro, wind, and biofuels to balance out the portfolio is the best idea.
Instead of passing it back. I don't want to strangle anybody with this cord. I'm starting at this end for a reason. The next question is, do you think the Plymouth Town Meeting vote on a solar array, which was 159 yes and only 19 no, what does that say about local citizen support for investing in renewables? And I'm starting with Grace because this was her baby.
It was definitely a team effort, I'm going to say, and thank you to the select board for putting up with me at just about every one of their meetings in the last year, because we really wanted to keep them in the loop. I think that we got a really good turnout of people who were supporting the project because we did a lot of outreach. We spoke a lot at the select board meetings. We did a public hearing, and we were able to show finally, after about 5 or 6 years of this being kind of an idea for municipal power to be offset with a solar project. We finally got into a year where there's some really good incentives. So we're going to see some great revenue from this particular array once it's up and running. So I think that was compelling. And that's why we had good turnout and good vote.
I'm really not trying to be gratuitous when I say that. Yes, The thing that gives me the most hope and inspiration are the kind of people who are up here who have taken it upon themselves to really take action, including on their volunteering their time. So I just want to be honest. And believe it or not, part of the reason that came to mind is because my belief is at this point, I don't know if I can read a support for renewables into support for solar, because solar just makes good sense. We installed an array a few years ago in the PE center across the river. It's a flat roof, so it's not the showpiece that I personally would like, but it's up there. Meets 90% of the building needs. And so far, we've saved an average of about $85,000 a year compared to our regular electric bill for the building. So I am very hopeful that we see continuing support for things like solar. But frankly, if we can just get people to really look at it in a non-biased way, I think the decision is pretty straightforward.
What he said. One of the things that an article that was published in Nature Communications, the title of the article was "Americans Experience a False Social Reality by Underestimating Popular Climate Policy Support by Nearly Half." And basically what the article says is that a ratio of 2 to 1, people do want to see significant climate action. The perception that those same people have is that it's only popular with the opposite ratio of 1 to 2. So 60+% of, this is the America across the country, want to see significant climate action, but they believe that only 30% actually do. And so this, this vote seemed to verify that. And one of the things that until climate is foremost in people's mind, nothing happens. And our politicians, no offense to anybody in this room.
Uh-oh, there's a lot here, Jerry.
I think you have to be more proactive about doing all this stuff. And I'm done.
What I think about when I read this question, what do you think that incredible vote says about local citizens supporting and investing in renewables? The first thing that I think of is all the people, and many of you are in this room, that have adopted solar energy super early. And it's because of you and the good experience you had and all the talking you did about it, that this community has just grown one person at a time with your familiarity and your support for renewable energy. So yay for the early adopters. I know there's several in this room that have had solar on their house for over 10 years. And kudos to you for just really helping with the educating and getting people more supportive.
Thank you. The cord is a little bit of an issue. Recently, the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission's influence and scope was reduced when Governor Sununu formed the Department of Energy. How has this affected your work and in turn the lives of our residents? And I'm going to start with Sandra.
This is a hard one. I can only talk to this issue about the New Hampshire Department of Energy in the way I've dealt with that department. I know 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was when the Public Utilities Commission, the New Hampshire Department of Energy broke off from the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission. And I know some Democrats supported it and many Republicans did. I know a lot of clean energy advocates did support starting the New Hampshire Department of Energy because it gave focus to the issue. And they felt that what was happening at the Utilities Commission, a lot of energy discussions about renewable energy were getting lost because the commission is all about regulatory issues. And so that was one of the reasons why I thought it was a good idea. I can tell you that being someone who deals with the New Hampshire Department of Energy, helping people get rebates and writing grants for projects for low-income families to have solar, I find that there's a little more accessibility And there seemed to be more specific division of duties. So I'm finding it helpful in my day-to-day work, just having a specific Department of Energy. And most states have a Department of Energy. So I think it elevated the issue here in New Hampshire, but I don't quite know all the politics behind it. I just know that I've found it helpful.
I know absolutely nothing about it.
I appreciate getting some of the questions in advance because I did some homework in order to be able to answer this, or to the best of my ability. So I want to repeat in the first part what Sandra said. In my day-to-day, there is a new agency to work with to think about grants and other things. And that I think has been beneficial. They just had to start fresh, reorganize, make new websites. So whether maybe, hopefully it's an aspect of the organization. Now university professors, where everyone hears that we indoctrinate people, and I actually try to think about that in my class and be honest, but not overly political, but I feel like I'm in a safe space, so I'm gonna be honest in this case. From what I understand, it's an interesting question because it comes from a politician who represents a smaller government is better. And so the question kind of to me becomes why. And one of the things that I saw a lot of commentary on is that the reorganization allows the governor's office to exert more force over the department. And so for me, that raises some concerns. In my day-to-day, it's been better. I don't know that the change has been long enough that I understand what the true, but that raises some concerns with me. And I did look at the latest efficiency standards released by the state. And they don't mention climate. They really don't mention renewables very much. It's all about cost control. So I felt there was some of that reflected in that, but I want to share this is something I'm still learning about, and that's based on my best speculation at this time.
Yeah, I like Jerry, don't know a lot about it. I was really disappointed when they closed the Office of Energy and Planning, and I don't remember under whose tutelage that was. Was it Benson? Something like that, but yeah, that was tragedy at least. If it's helping Sandra do her work, I trust Sandra's opinion about that. So.
Very small, just a few people that are very friendly with that are helpful. That's probably what has formed my decision.
I second that. It's better organized. It's easier to find things. Processes are clear.
The proof, I guess, will be in the pudding.
All right.
He ran away. Okay, next question. Kind of ties in. What economic opportunities do you see in renewable energy? And how can we convince people who work in fossil fuels that there's a future for them in renewables?
Yeah, I'm wondering.
All
All right, here we go.
I think it's a really interesting question, and I was offered to answer this because as I think of myself as a teacher first, and as a teacher, it's a great time to be doing what I do. We started a sustainability studies program this year. As many of you know, we have more federal incentives for renewables and energy efficiency at the home level. That funding is out there for more than it's been in the past for all kinds of scales. So I think that translates to a ton of opportunities in industry and jobs. And one of the things that is I try and speak to students about a lot is these jobs have a really broad base. It's finance, it's marketing, it's communication. It's not just what people may think of as engineering and very technical skills that we associate that way. So I think there are great opportunities. The idea of retraining or convincing people who are in the fossil fuel industry is a really difficult one to me because change is difficult. And I am a wise guy, so forgive me, but I always wonder, like, when Henry Ford was making the assembly line, were we thinking, you know, we really need to talk to buggy makers and make sure that they're not left behind in this transition? And maybe the same thing for when we made cell phones and other things were obsolete. So I don't discount it, and I think anytime we see a major shift, as this would be in our economic base, thinking about retraining at the federal level and state levels and community levels is necessary. But I certainly wouldn't say that those concerns should be any barrier to change, because we apply that pretty selectively, in my opinion.
What he said.
What he said. I guess my main thought on economic opportunities, do I see in renewable energy? Obviously, the incredible economic opportunities for saving money by installing renewable energy on your home, such as a personal economic opportunity. But it's definitely an excellent field for young people to get in, and we need them to get into it. I heard on NPR the other day that we need 80,000 more electricians to join the workforce every year to make up for the demand, more demand for their services, as well as those that are retiring. So people in the renewable energy field, including electricians, they are needed in big way, make a lot of money. And so we at Paray partner with Mockley Electric, and we're very lucky to have two 20-year-olds that are apprentices and getting their degree. So the biggest economic opportunity, I think, is just starting off probably in a trade school if they want to be involved in renewable energy. And unfortunately, we don't have enough of those training programs here in New Hampshire. We had one at the Lakes Region Community College, and they stopped it about 4 or 5 years ago. So to the state reps that are listening, if there's anything you can do to encourage training programs for electrical apprentices or a solar installer certificate like they have in Vermont. One thing I'd love to just let everybody know that here in New Hampshire, you're not supposed to touch a solar panel unless you're an electrician or an apprentice. So you can imagine how that increases the cost when you want to hire perhaps people to work on the ground and unload those solar panels and bring them to the person on the roof. You don't need an electrician to do that. Perhaps it's a carpenter or someone familiar with setting up staging and that kind of thing. So in Vermont, they have a solar installer certificate, which covers more of those basic skills like putting racking on roofs and constructing the pipes that you need to do ground mounts. But here in New Hampshire, if the solar panels is going to touch the racking, they want an electrician or an apprentice to touch it. And I think that's slowing things down because installers are not keeping up with the demand right now in New Hampshire.
Well, sounds like Grace has something.
And I know Revision Energy can't get enough people to do their installs. So they have an apprentice program that some kid that comes right out of high school can get a job there, moving stuff around and coming up the ladder. And 4 years later can end up with an electrician's license. We need more of that.
Right, and they're the only apprentice program in the state that's sponsored by a business. I think the Department of Energy or the Public Utilities Commission made an exception for Revision Energy to start this apprenticeship program, and it's been very helpful. We need more of them.
I was also going to talk about Revision Energy. Thank you, Jerry. But one thing I recall years ago and I loved was British Petroleum had a, what do you want to call it, a shift in their marketing, and they started with a program called BP, Beyond Petroleum. And I thought it was so groundbreaking. This was, not recently, it was quite a while ago. I think the fossil fuel industry now, I think they acknowledge that they need to start retooling and shifting. It's just, sometimes doing business as usual is difficult to get out, it's difficult to get your feet out of the concrete of that business as usual. But I just found a lot of hope in the shifting that BP did to Beyond Petroleum. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'll start right from the middle. I would like also to mention that we just gave up a whole bunch of money for hydrogen because the guy in the corner office is a fossil fuel guy. So I'm pretty upset about that. Next question, what can New Hampshire Electric Cooperative members be doing to encourage, and what can the members be doing to encourage NHEC to purchase more green energy for our electric power? I'd like to preface this by the fact that I invited Brian Kalman of NHEC to join us, and he didn't feel he was ready, but he wants to come some other time. I think it would be an interesting conversation. But what can we do to pressure them more to bring in renewables?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be said is that I know this was the case when I first moved into the state. You know, I get an electric bill and I pay it. I was a customer. Well, when you're a member of the co-op, you're not a customer, you are a member, and your vote counts. And you can and should, it would be helpful if you expressed your opinions to the members of the board and showed up to board member meetings or, and particularly the annual meeting. Am I still in your phone?
No.
Okay. And yeah, and reach out to your board members and tell them. This goes back to the perception. The perception that some of the board members have are that people are much more concerned with cost than they are with renewable, with clean energy. And from our experience, that's not true. There are people that are hurting and have a hard time getting past the cost of things. But there is a good chunk of the membership that wants to see renewable energy.
Thank you, Jerry. Jerry mentioned in his intro that he's been working with other concerned citizens to work with the co-op to encourage them to come up with a decarbonization plan. And I've been lucky enough to work with Jerry and Will Abbott and Ted Van Stan on this project. And it's been really cool that the co-op has welcomed us as what they call us member partners. And we've been working with the VPs at the co-op, and we feel that we've had a pretty big contribution to encouraging them to do what we're now calling the decarbonization plan. Or some might think of it as a net zero plan or carbon emissions reduction plan. But we've been really putting a lot of pressure on them, and it's been well received, and a lot of their staff are very supportive. So what we have heard from the new CEO, Alyssa, what's her last name?
She's got two last names.
Oh,
That
okay.
loses me right now.
She lives here in Plymouth. She is supportive of a carbon emissions reduction plan for the co-op. She came from a different utility that I think already had one. But she has said loud and clear to us, the members have got to tell the board, come up with a strong decarbonization plan. So one thing that I would love if everybody would go onto the co-op website, there is an email for the board of directors, and just send an email saying, you want the co-op to be purchasing more clean energy. It's as simple as that, or to come up with a strong plan to find new ways, new places to buy clean energy. I hear sometimes there's not enough out there to buy. So to support more development of clean energy, or support more incentives for their members to install. As many of you know, their net metering rate could be a lot stronger than it is. It's only about 60 to 70% of the retail rate that you get when your solar exports. It should be closer to 85, 90% in my opinion. So that's another thing, is they could improve their solar energy rate. That's something that's been on the board's docket to look at. So we just decided as a committee that really cared about climate change, that this was the place that we felt we can make a huge difference, because the electricity generation sector is the second leading cause of carbon emissions in our country. So I bet you is almost everybody here a co-op member? Can you raise your hand? And look at that. And there's 80,000 accounts, and we have 20 here, 25. And hardly anybody attends the board meetings. It's the last Tuesday of every month. They have a member input for 15 minutes. You can go on by Zoom and just express that you'd love to see them purchase more clean energy as part of the default, the co-op power. So when you look at your electric bill, you see co-op power. Most of that power is being purchased from fossil fuel. Nuclear is a big one, but only about 15 to 20% is clean energy. So thank you for listening, because we're really excited to have a chance to urge people to speak up.
So two things I want to add about the co-op. Jerry and his band of bandits, and also some folks from the Plymouth Energy Commission. I think this has been 3 years in the running now, have developed a list of questions that are renewable energy sensitive for new members. Excuse me, so those people who are running as a board member for the co-op. They didn't do it this year, I'm hearing. But I have all good faith that we'll do it again in the future. But it really gave the citizens an opportunity to question the potential new members and find out what kind of sensitivity they had. And then the other thing I want to mention is that we worked really close when we were at the Plymouth Energy Commission. We're proposing this solar array. We were hoping to get behind a building or two to feed that energy right that we would generate at the solar array right to a building. As Sandra said, it's the best bang for your buck, if you will. Our location it's behind the airport, but the airport's a very small user. But we worked really closely with the co-op to create a plan for them to buy the energy. As far as I understand, this wasn't possible, 10 years ago for a municipality to build an array that size to be paid for the energy generation. So this is a shift, I think, for the co-op, and Eversource does not, you can't have that conversation with Eversource apparently. So I feel really good about that, that the co-op is engaged in a conversation with us to buy energy.
How can we make renewable energy affordable for lower income people? Who would like to start with that?
Actually, it's still in its early stages, but the Inflation Reduction Act has a ton of money. And a lot of it is geared towards lower income, middle and lower income folks. And I had nothing to do this afternoon. So I went online to a website that explained some of what was available. So any household making less than 80% of the AMI, average median income, they can qualify for discounts on electrification of, it could be appliances, it could be even rental. If someone is a renter, they are, and I'm not sure how widespread it is right now, but you can get a window heat pump. And if you rent and you move, you can take it with you. If your income is at such a level, the entire thing can be paid for by the IRA with a discount. If your income is 80 to 150% of the average area median income, you can qualify for a 50% discount on those same appliances. And there are also tax credits available even for folks that make more than that. This is a great tool, and if done properly, and if the word gets out and people sign on, this can be, I think, a game changer for low and moderate income households.
I guess just to follow up on Jerry's comment about the Inflation Reduction Act, there are tons of grant opportunities for municipalities and nonprofit organizations to build solar arrays for low and moderate income households. And what's tricky, I know for Paray, is the people power to make all that happen. So I know a lot of people are struggling with all these opportunities coming out of Biden's Infrastructure and Inflation Reduction Act, but we just can't act fast enough. One of the things that I wanted to mention is the EECBG grant. That, if you can remember the American Recovery Act, back when Biden and Obama were working together, the town of Plymouth had an EECBG grant, and that was Paul Phillips with the Plymouth Energy Commission in Paray, and that's what put solar panels on the Plymouth Village Water and Sewer Department, office building, and some on the elementary school, and a couple of other things. But I just wanted everyone to know that's working in municipalities, that program is now starting again, and I think the deadline's as soon as June. But that program wants to see, and it scores higher, if the municipality is doing something for the low income families in the communities. So there's everything that they've written out of this act seems to have more money and more higher scoring if a part of your program or plan includes solar and electrification for low income families. So for the town of Holderness, we're actually, or I don't know, but I got to assume they're getting a lot of the same emails I'm getting. I mean, if you're a facilities person, I would think they're seeing the same sort of opportunities. But I think we need to get the word out that there is there's just a tremendous amount of opportunities for solar energy and all things renewable and all things for the most vulnerable people in our community. I do have to mention solar shares. I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but we started in partnership with the New Hampshire Electric Co-op building solar arrays using charitable funds where all of that energy is credited to low-income families' bills. We have a project out in Warren on Apple Knockers General Store. If you ever go in there, thank them. They have a big array on their roof. All that power goes to low-income families in Warren. And in front of the Common Man, the picnic pavilions above the Frosty Scoops ice cream truck, all that power is going to low-income families. And Lakes Region Conservation Trust Board of Directors gave us space in the back of their field to install a 30 kW system, where all that solar is going to go to 12 families in the Center Harbor, Molten Borough area and Holderness area. So it's a small program. We need to scale up probably another 100%, 200%, but at least this community is addressing that issue where many aren't. So.
Just one more thing on the discounts available to low-income families. It totals $14,000 a year per family. So that's significant.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I just wanted to say that I think the comment raises an additionally important point. Let me address it directly by saying for schools, the Inflation Reduction Act has a whole K through 12 dedicated funding section. So that's the place they should be looking, no doubt. And it just came out. But your question, I think, illustrates that even when there's federal monies available, sometimes connecting that with the people who need it is very difficult, and it's not always clear where that responsibility falls. So that's where groups like Ray and others will be really essential, because we need to think about how those connections happen. But it is a very good time to be asking this question, because instead of expressing only frustration, maybe we can say not enough, but something, which is how I'll conclude.
And I want to thank Joyce for getting us together tonight, because this is where information gets shared and hopefully disseminated. That's the only part I want to add to this part of the conversation. And kudos to Parade for starting the solar charge project with the co-op. Kudos to the co-op too.
Another question, but before we move on, I want to know if the limit in net metering is causing you a problem in building larger arrays. Do you want to mention that? I know it's a legislative thing and they haven't been able to pull it up.
So I don't know specifically in this town, but I was just reading an article. Oh, it was from Dan Weeks from Revision, that he was working with a company in Manchester, I believe it was, that was deeply concerned about the climate crisis. They had money and a vacant lot where they were going to build a bunch of, they were going to build a huge array to offset all the power in their facility, but that cap prevented them from doing anything really meaningful, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
painful to hear that.
and
Just so you know what we're talking about, it's a 1 megawatt cap, right? So what it means is you can still build this system and generate solar, but they're not going to give you anything other than a wholesale rate for anything that's exported. And so that just makes it so installing that solar doesn't make it worthwhile for a business person. They want to get a nicer credit than a wholesale cost for the power that they've invested in building. And so if you build something bigger than 1 megawatt, which is 1,000 kilowatts system, and most people in their homes have between 5 and 10 kilowatts, then like Grace said, they won't go forward with the project. And these are businesses that could be putting a big mark on the amount of clean energy that we could be adding to the grid if they increase that cap. So I would say in our community, probably not so much, but where there are larger businesses, it is an issue.
We've been trying to raise that for a long time and going nowhere. Recommend one action that PAD members can take to reduce their energy footprint.
I like suggesting actions that don't cost any money. So Parade started on the motto that reduce before you produce. So reduce your energy use. And one of the easiest ways to reduce your energy use is through energy conservation and not using any energy at all. So one of the things that I do is at least twice a month, I wish it was much more than that, I don't use my car. So I have no car days, and I work really hard at thinking about my energy use and trying to minimize it where I can. So the other thing I would recommend is appreciate the energy you're using. Recognize that when you're using energy, you're adding to the climate crisis. Think about it, and that might motivate you to use a little less. But energy conservation, keep it on your mind all the time. That's my suggestion.
To me, it's real easy. Electrify everything.
Wash your clothes in cold water. You would be stunned at how much carbon it saves compared to other measures. It's more than being a vegetarian. It's more than driving a Prius.
And I would add to adopt consumerism like your Depression era parents and grandparents. I think the biggest problem is our consumerism. Yeah, I don't even know where to go with that. I think that's our biggest problem right now. And if you can think about what you're buying and why, and maybe deferring, I think that would help a lot, because it takes energy to make everything that you buy.
I really almost want to cite my mother, because when I was a kid, I learned how to stick a light bulb in a sock with a hole in it to darn it. Does that make sense to anybody?
yes, it does.
Darn your socks. Darn your socks. Okay, we're going to open this up to questions from the floor. Now, we don't have a wireless mic that works. So do you want to come up, Cheryl?
I project.
Yeah, I tell you what, ask your question.
I'm just curious, with the fact that the community network evolving in the state, is this potentially going to incentivize agencies like the co-op, diversify it for the power of our house, or are more communities. People trying to define community power is to have much more energy efficient source. What's your policy on?
Yeah, let me see if I can tackle this, because the Plymouth Energy Commission 2 years ago had a very long conversation with the community power people. And what we came up with as a decision is that we were going to table that conversation because as a community, and this is how I understood it at the time, is that as a community, you had to decide how to buy the power and what your most important issues were, so to speak. And so a community had to agree together that that they want to purchase non-fossil fuel based resources, right? To really have that be effective. But a community might say, I want the cheapest power. So we found that a little problematic at the time. Now, there might have been some headway made because we decided at the Plymouth Energy Commission, we were going to just put a lot of energy into getting a solar array passed at town meeting and built. So I don't know if anyone else has any more current understanding of community power, but that was our roadblock at the time.
This is strictly my opinion, but there are 4 major suppliers in the state. The co-op, they have by far the cheapest rate of Eversource, Liberty, and Unitil. If you get your energy from an investor-owned utility, not considering community power, is nuts. You really ought to. The co-op, it's a harder case to make because the rates are so much lower. And as far as one of the issues that the co-op has for expanding the amount of green energy they buy is if they make a long-term investment of a power purchase agreement and they bet wrong, so they sign a contract that's going to cost more, let's say 7 years from now. And people have the option to switch providers. That's going to leave the remainder of the co-op members holding the bag for a bad investment decision. So that's something that's in the back of their heads. And I don't know what that had to do with community power, but it seemed to at the moment.
And I'll just, I won't add to the second point, Jeremy. So that was kind of the reason why the 4 of us started to work with the co-op on urging them to green up their co-op power. Because we felt like, at least I did, and that Jerry and I differ on this a little bit, I felt like we already have community power as co-op members. So why are we going to put all these years of effort into starting community power? It's a huge undertaking when you look at the manual of how to do it, because Hanover has, we're like, this is crazy. Essentially, we're starting a co-op. So let's pressure our co-op that we're members of and get them to green up their power. So again, I just urge everybody to email or pick up the phone and urge the board to do that. They're in the middle of a strategic plan process, and we have urged them to add a whole new column for decarbonization, and they're agreeable to that. And they're going to be presenting it at the June annual meeting. So it's always announced on the website. So we urge people to attend that.
So I have solar in my house and drive an electric car. Absolutely love it. I just noticed my electric bill from the co-op last month, or for April, is going to be negative $75. So it's like, all wonderful. But solar and wind and other renewables they're sporadic. So one of the challenges that I've been struggling with is storage. The only way I can get more efficient with my own use is storage. And cars, of course, require storage. And as someone who's concerned about the environment, I'm also concerned about the mining impact that all the battery technology has on the environment, and the fact that we're getting a lot of it from China and from African countries and so forth. I wonder if this panel could just discuss kind of the opportunities for storage, and how to drive that to consumer level and what's happening in that area, and also the challenges associated with storage and, the environmental issues associated with that.
Oh, all right.
Actually, this is another one we can talk about, the co-op. We have a project going on at Plymouth. We've been doing it for a year on vehicle to grid. So basically, we have 2 Nissan Leafs, and Nissan Leafs can do bi-directional charging at high speed. So they can both take a charge and discharge it. And so the co-op approached us about doing a test program on vehicle to grid systems, because it can help them meet peak demand at a lower price and with more renewable energy. Because what you flip on in the immediate demand response is almost always fossil fuels because of the storage issue. So the way it works is the co-op, again, we're I believe, the only place in New England doing this. Part of the reason is that the electric company has to use what's called transactive pricing, where instead of paying one price for electricity all the time, you actually pay the market rate. So we have a system, software behind it. It buys low, and then when the co-op asks, it sells them back the power. And we've been making an average with one leaf of about $400 a month doing that. And if you go to the co-op's page, they're one of the only power companies that we're doing this. Presented on in other parts of the states, and like a lot of people would like to do it, but the power companies aren't into it. But the co-op has a whole information page, and they're looking for partners and things. It's really cutting edge, but relevant to your question. If you have the car anyway, the battery's there, and that's some of that lesson impact.
And it's already been mined, so you might as well use it.
And, there's questions about it, but so the data we've seen so far, and part of the software is managing load and discharge. They claim, the impact on the battery is not expected to be huge. The other thing I'll mention before, I know I'm rambling on, but I think because of the battery concerns, there's actually been some interesting work done in the physical storage of energy. So in Switzerland recently, as well as Scotland, they opened up man-made reservoirs, some of which, one of which at least is in caves, and they use electricity produced from renewables to pump water up a hill. And then when night falls, if it's made from solar, they release the water and generate hydro with it. And so it's a non-battery way of storing it. One other innovative system I've seen is basically, if you can imagine a windmill that works by a weight instead of the wind, hoist it with the energy during the day and then release it, and gravity pulls it. So I also share the concerns about batteries and things. I'm hopeful, once again, as you shared, that the diversity of approaches might lead us to the best result.
I was just going to say real quickly, because I know there's some other questions in the audience. This is a tough one, the battery piece. My family's about to add solar through the Plymouth Area Renewable Energy Initiative, and Sandra and I have spirited conversations about battery storage, no battery storage. It's a tough one, and I just feel like there is no free ride for us if we're going to do business as usual on this earth, right? Living with our lights in our buildings and our heat, and walking and turn the thermostat, right? So I don't know whether you're doing fossil fuels with a lot of long-term damage to the climate, or other sources of energy with other impacts. It's tough. It's a tough one.
Energy generation is always impactful. So our job, I think, realistically, is not to think we're going to find something that's going to be free, but to minimize the negatives.
If you have spare time, there's an outfit named Energy Vault that has really cool projects. It's what Brian was talking about, using gravity to store energy. So if you have a little time and you're banging around on the web, check out Energy Vault.
And just one last thing, the co-op, I think, just announced today that they're increasing the pilot program that Brian is describing. If you have an electric car, they're looking for more partners. And I think there was an article in the Concord Monitor just today that I'd be happy to forward to you if you want to forward it to the group. Batteries, I have to say though, you got to watch them, you got to pay attention to them. They can melt, they can overheat, they can cause fire. It's not something to get into without a lot of thought. If you're a technical person, if you've got a good concrete basement room that you know if something happened, it's going to keep the house from, there have been problems with house fires with batteries, I guess. And we've seen in our own parade, we've probably done about 12 systems in the past. And when batteries get older, 7, 8, 9 years, you're not the lithium batteries, but the ones that a lot of people have, they can cause damage. So people have to be really careful. Just like, when you hear about batteries exploding in planes, we just encourage people to just really think about it and be careful about it. But it's a needed part of this equation. So if you're a technical person and you're someone who's going to be checking what's going on and keeping track, but if you're someone who's just going to put it in your basement and never think about it again, you may not be the right person for it. But if you're someone that is technical, I think it should be considered.
I think we have time for one more question. Richard?
Yeah, I'd like to raise the question of second order solar, namely wood, since we got a lot of wood around and of course trees are solar powered ultimately. And not dealing with the wood chip issue at the Bridgewater Electric Power, because I've spoken with some loggers and they say there's just not enough money in the wood chips to make that profitable. But the question I have is a really normal question around here, namely using wood in the fireplace. Now, especially with the ash borer, a lot of my ash trees are dying, and it's a good hardwood for building a fire. So the only expense for me, besides my labor and running the chainsaw, which isn't too much, is the wood. And then I worry about two ecological problems. One is the lack of organic material on the forest floor, but also the particulate matter coming out of the smokestack. So I can see, as I've sketched out, some really important positives and some questions and maybe even some negatives. How do you guys sort out second order solar power, namely trees?
So my husband and I live in a house 100% heat from wood. We have a wood lot, and again, I feel like there's no free ride. Does that cause some air pollution? Sure. We have a really, really efficient masonry heater that was built 10 years ago, reburns and whatnot. But you can't. Not everybody can do that. So there's my 5 cents worth.
To me, I do acknowledge those negatives. So I would not say that wood heat is a solution for us as community to adopt as a wholesale solution, but for the occasional homeowner who's willing to identify, that they want to put into work and that kind of thing, I think it is a fine way to reduce it. And of course, part of that equation becomes the source of the wood and how often it's logged. And if it's salvaged or something like that, I think that's a good example of where, to me, it seems quite reasonable. And I think the biomass issue, fortunately, here in New England, I remember when I moved here, someone once said to me, "You want to be a tree farmer? Just stop mowing." And so we can grow a lot of trees. We have biomass. So I come from a place that was heavily impacted, the redwoods out in California, impacted by logging. So it's always on my mind. But this environment, I think, is one of the more. So again, I want to stress diversity. I hate to see our hillsides, and I don't think the particulates are a good thing in mass. I'll conclude by saying we have atmosphere conditions here where we don't have a strong inversion or anything. So those particulates aren't an immediate health concern in our community.
I just have one more quick thing to say that I want everyone to know about. The Plymouth Village Water and Sewer Treatment Plant is doing an amazing job at reducing their energy consumption and installing renewables. And when we talk about diversification, they're looking at doing some sort of hydropower in the water that gets discharged back into the river after it's clean. So there's some new technology there where that could produce some electricity. So they're doing a great job at taking advantage of a number of the state incentives. And so just want to let you know in case you didn't know that.
Okay, one more question? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I'm interested in the conservation side. And I know it's not another topic. Not that. But I'm just surprised that we're not, the country, the world is considering reducing speed limits with them. I remember when Carter was president, I agree with that. And did a very unpopular thing. He reduced the speed limit to 55 miles an hour, but I have done a lot of studies at how much food goes at 65 or 55. Get really good a return on that slower speed. Now, obviously, that means lifestyle changes, and I don't think we can maintain our lifestyle the way we currently, as a nation, as a society, are living it, and which, you know, part of the problem with ruining the planet. Convenience items, we talk about consumption. And I don't know, it's a real problem. Trying to convince people they don't need all that stuff, and it's ruining the planet, but I think it's very doable. I had one the upside, I never used a dryer. And you save so much money. Try that.
Yeah.
In the winter time, if you're using a wood stove, why use a humidifier hanging on the doors? There are so many tricks that people are not aware of. And I think we need to, I know it's not a popular topic, hopefully today, but I think maybe we need to kind of have a think tank of ways to conserve right now, you know, that you can do if you have wood to will. But I think that those are steps that we can take. And I'm trying to think of a mechanism, a way to, way move it. Instead of just talking about alternative high-tech energy, because I think it does scare off people. I think people are skeptical, you know, the whole battery thing with these plastics. None of this stuff is really recyclable or biodegradable 100%. Obviously, I mean, not green. But I think, you know, that there are different things we can do to incentivize people to get people to say, you know, these steps and then consider other steps.
It's not really a question there, but would anybody like to add to that?
Yeah, you.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Experience, what would it take to raise awareness about this? Or do you want to do it? This is not
Just
possible.
keep talking to everybody you know about it. I think,
I do till they
but
do.
urging people to appreciate the energy they're using but to acknowledge when I use energy, I'm adding to the climate crisis. And that, when I say that to myself, boy, that makes me think about driving slower and other things. So just yay for energy conservation.
We do need to wrap this up pretty soon, but I see Gigi is energetically raising her hand. If you have a quick question, Gigi?
It's not a question, I just want to tell you really strange. They're going to a place called mall and taking a lot of stuff out of it, and then they're going to a place that says stop and spending it all over.
Thank you, Gigi. I think on that note, we say thank you to our wonderful panel. Before everybody goes, I'd like you to help us clean up your spot. We do need a cleanup committee. We don't have one, so it falls on those of us who are here last. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next month.